Well, good morning, everyone. Let me get my camera adjusted here. Coming to you with a very serious update. Uh, Hurricane Melissa, and there comes Hurricane Athena through the dog door. Hurricane Melissa is bearing down on Jamaica right now, and this is a historic event in many ways. And so I thought I would bring this to you live. This is a once in a generation, multi generational, once in a lifetime, maybe once in a multi lifetime event. So I thought I would bring this to you live, uh, bring this to you in a way that, from a meteorologist perspective and also a pastor's perspective. So let's get right to it. Um, the 8 o'clock advisory just came out, and let me move my window over a little bit here. I can see I'm cut off. There we go. Yeah, let me get that adjusted. Okay, so this is what we're talking about. At 9 a.m., advisory just came out. Um, Pressure is down to 896 millibars. This is unbelievable. This is one of the top 3 or 4 storms on record. Matter of fact, let me check that out real quick. That'll make this um, right around the strength of Milton at its peak in the Gulf last year, right around Rita at its peak. So 1 millibar or so. Uh, Winds are 180 miles per hour, and it's moving to the northeast at 7. So we'll get to this. Here's where we stand right now. This was the 8 o'clock position, but what we're going to do is look at an overall view of the satellite before we get into the more detailed data. Let me zoom in here, kind of give you an idea of what we're looking at. You can see we have a satellite loss here. Let me get my mic here so you guys can probably hear me a little better. And you can see what we have here. We have this trough that we talked about a couple of days ago coming in from the west. This is enhancing the outflow. This is called baroclinic lift, baroclinic enhancement. Anytime you have this, and now what you can see here on your screen, you can see how these clouds are now fanning out, and that is the best way that I've always illustrated this is when you pull start like a lawnmower engine, how you get that engine going. Anytime you have an upper level trough approaching a system, and let me show you what that looks like. Obviously, that's not what we want to see. Let me zoom out here, and let me show you the upper levels. Let me show you the 200 millibar winds. So we have the storm down here, and let me get to the current time right about here. So you have the storm, and you can see you have this trough approaching, and this is enhancing the outflow of the storm. This is enhancing the storm's ability to remove air, and that's what tropical systems need. You need to be able to remove air so that more air can flow into the center, more thunderstorms can form, and this is called latent heat of condensation. Anytime you, matter of fact, we were just having this conversation in our home a few days ago where my daughter was removing nail polish and with acetone from my wife's hands, and she was talking about how cool it was. And I was explaining that as evaporational cooling. And so anytime you evaporate, and you notice this if you've ever gotten out of the shower on a cold day, you feel cold because the air is dry, and that requires you removing heat in order to evaporate. and stuff that has a lower temperature like acetone or alcohol, it requires a more heat to be pulled out in order to evaporate. Well, the exact opposite is the physics of it in terms of condensation. You have to add heat in order to condensate, and this allows that. That's kind of a layman's explanation. It's a lot more complicated physically than that, but the exact opposite has to happen in tropical systems, and you have to have a very tranquil environment for that. And when I show you the satellite imagery of this absolute buzz saw that's bearing down on Jamaica right now, um, you can see it's getting very, very close to the surface here, the coastline, Treasure Coast here. Um, and we'll look closer at some data here in just a minute. You can really see what's going on here. We have a perfectly symmetrical system. We haven't had any eye wall replacement cycles, which is very unusual in category 3 or higher storms. Major hurricanes go through what we call eye wall replacement cycles. You get the eye wall form, and it gradually constricts and contracts. Then you usually get a secondary eye wall that starts to move inward. You get when the recon flies through there, they usually see a secondary wind maximum. In other words, they see a peak wind around the eye wall, then the winds drop off, and then they'll see another peak wind, not near as high as the eye wall maximum, but then they'll see another peak wind, and that peak wind will gradually, that secondary peak wind will gradually get closer and closer, and it'll choke off that inner eye wall. And so you'll get this real rapid buildup or gradual buildup of intensity, and then you'll see this period of weakening. And if the storm lasts long enough, you can go through 3 or 4 of these eye wall cycles in major hurricanes. Hurricane Allen went through 3 of these eye wall cycles. Hurricane Milton last year went through 3 of these eye wall cycles. And I mentioned those 2 storms because they hit Category 5 status 3 separate times, which was very unusual. Now, what makes this storm historic is it has never gone through an eye wall cycle. Instead, it has gone through what we call eye wall melds. Small little eye walls has started to form on the outskirts of the storm, but instead of forming complete outer eye walls and choking off the inner, they have just melded. They've meshed with the main eye wall. The eye, if you go back and look for the last couple of days, the center of the storm has been, and there's Athena, the center of the storm has been consistently measured. The eye diameter has consistently been measured at 10 nautical miles. I have never seen that. Now, I'm not saying it's never existed. Perhaps in the Western Pacific, we've seen that. A status quo eye where it's just been consistent. But in the Atlantic, I've never seen it. I've never heard of it. And I'm not, like, again, I'm not saying it's never existed, but I've never seen it and I've never heard of it. It's extremely unusual to see this kind of presentation on a satellite, especially for so long, to see some kind of a status quo system at equilibrium and constantly just gradually getting stronger. You've had some minor fluctuations in intensity. Pressure will drop, then it'll go up a few millibars as we go through one of these eye wall melds, and then it constantly will drop again. So, as we look at what's happening here, we've got the storm getting very close to Jamaica, the Treasure Coast here, or I believe it's. I tell you what, this is how we'll figure this out. So let's go to Google Earth and let me get you centered here. Yeah, Treasure Beach. I'm sorry, it's Treasure Beach. And you can see where the recon has been. They've been centered right around here. And matter of fact, you can see they've been flying a lot of loop-de-loops, getting as much data about this center as possible, because this is a great research opportunity, unfortunately. Normally they fly what we call an alpha pattern. They will fly in like this, they'll fly across, and then they'll fly down, and they just kind of fly this hourglass looking pattern because they're measuring the quadrants so they can Hurricane Center can put out appropriate warnings and marine warnings. We think of hurricanes only about what the impacts on the land, but we have to remember there's a reason why the Hurricane Center puts out warnings and advisories on storms that are 2,000 miles out to sea in the middle of the Atlantic when nobody really cares what's going on. And that's because we have shipping interests. We have commercial aviation interests. We don't, if you're flying to Europe, at 35,000 feet, you do not want to be flying into a tropical system that's at 45 degrees north that's in what we call the Nat tracks going from New York to London, and there be a category 2 hurricane in the middle of October or late September in the Nat tracks, which is where all of the air traffic goes across the northern Atlantic. You do not want to be flying in that. And so that's the reason why they put these things out. And you do not want to be sailing a boat. Believe it or not, there's still people who sail pleasure craft across the Atlantic. I've watched a lot of those YouTube videos. You want to know about that stuff. If you're a transport vessel, if you're transporting oil, you're transporting goods, you're transporting cargo, you want to know about this stuff. And when we look at some of the models, especially the European, we're looking at 60, 65-foot seas for portions of the Atlantic. Once this thing moves out and gets free of the Bahamas and heads towards Bermuda, the models are putting out 60 to 65-foot seas. You want to know about that stuff. And some of these systems have put out seas out in the middle of the Atlantic, have put seas close to 100 feet. So that's the reason why we do this, for public safety. So this is the track that the hurricane centers have, the hurricane hunters have flown, and this particularly is Air Force Flight 303, and we call this the Teal flight. Now we have another aircraft in there that is the NOAA flight, and we call that Kermit. And so when we get back here, we have a drop sign, and that's what this little spyglass image here is. It is a drop sign. And so actually let me lock this. All right, now I can move myself around here, hopefully. Nope, I still can't. Okay, let me just move this over. Sorry about this. This is kind of on the fly here. There we go. So what I can do now is I can click this and it'll tell me everything I want to know. Well, unfortunately, you cannot see it on the screen. I don't know why it's doing that. But what this says here is that the pressure of this latest drop sonde, which was earlier this morning, was 893 millibars, and that it had 13 miles per hour of wind. Now, that means the pressure here should be about 892 millibars, which would beat Katrina, which would beat Milton. And we'll see exactly what they do with that. Now, as I come up here into some of these wind speeds, and there's another way I can look at this. And matter of fact, indulge me for a second while I get to the site. Just bear with me. And I will pull up the actual recon data. That way you guys can actually see what is happening with the recon data. All right, I got it up here. I got the recon data here. I'm just going to have to slide. There we go. I'm just going to have to slide this over. Y'all don't want to see me anyway, do you? Well, there we go. Every website's a little different on how it's laid out, so I have to kind of work on the fly here, adjusting my screen. Okay, so this is the latest data here from Air Force Reconnaissance. And if we go back a couple of pages, this is from a site called Storm 2K, and I've been on this site for decades, literally. And so this is what the drop sonde looks like. Here, the very one that I was showing you. You can see here the surface was 893 millibars. Let me zoom this in here. One more. There we go. 893 millibars at the surface with 13 knots of wind. And how we usually do this as meteorologists is for every 10 knots of wind that the dropsonde picks up, because they're trying to hit the exact center. A perfect dropsonde in the center would find zero wind, because that's where you know you have the exact lowest pressure, because there's no pressure gradient force, what we call PGF, pressure gradient force, to produce any wind. Because that is how wind is produced. It's a difference in temperature, it's a difference in pressure. And so if you have no wind, you have no differences in pressure. So they're trying to hit the exact center. And it's very hard to do from 10,000 feet, because you have different competing wind currents all the way down that column, and it could be tilted a little bit. So you may be up here thinking you're calm, and as you fall down, you're not calm, if that makes sense. So you have 893 millibars at 13 knots of wind. So that's for 10 knots of wind speed for 1 millibar, that means it should be around 893 millibars. So if we go back and look at the wind speeds, so I'm going to zoom in here just so you can look at this. And what we can see here is absolutely insane wind speeds. All right, these wind speeds here, let's see here. There we go. These wind speeds here that you see right in here, these are what we call SFMR wind speeds. All right. This is your max wind speed it recorded, but these are your SFMR wind speeds. That's 150 knots. That's 175 miles an hour. And it hasn't even really been sampling the strongest part of the storm yet. If we go back and look at where it is, it's only been sampling the northwest quadrant and the southeast quadrant. If I go, and I know, guys, again, I know it's not showing up here, but this one's showing an SFMR, which SFMR is, as I mentioned in the video I did the other day, that is measuring sea foam. Now, it gets a little skewed when we get into these higher ranges. It has an issue, but they're showing a peak flight level wind here of 146 knots, which is 168 miles an hour. Here is 170 miles an hour. Here is 173 miles an hour. And then we start to drop off. When we look down here in the southeast quad, we had 172 miles an hour. We had 185 miles an hour of flight level winds, and we had an SFMR speed here of 192 miles per hour. That's just absolutely crazy. I have seen wind speeds like that before, but as I mentioned, I believe it was in a video in one of the videos yesterday, or I can't remember where I mentioned it. Maybe it was just it was to some friends. They found a dropsonde with a wind speed of 242 miles an hour. Now it could have been in a gust, it could have been a mesovortex, but it was still the highest wind speed ever recorded by a dropsonde in a tropical cyclone. So as we get more and more data from the recon, and as it heads into the other quadrants, you can see it sampled these winds up here. It did it. This is the NOAA plane. So let me take a look and see what the NOAA plane is doing real quick. Let's see where it is. Okay, so the NOAA plane is also through the center, and it measured 895 millibars with 7 knots of wind. Okay, so it had 895 millibars with 7 knots of wind, and it measured this at 14Z, which would have been 9 o'clock. And then we have this drops on here. That measured it 30 minutes earlier. So basically both of these are validating about 893 to 895 millibars. So you're going to have some pulsing, obviously. It looks like it's starting to bottom out as we get really close to the coast. So how close is this to the coast? Let's take a look here. And I just realized I didn't have it on the screen here. It's just one of those, moments where everything's going real fast. So how close to the coast is this? This latest, since the NOAA plane had the latest drops on here, and it's sitting right in here. Let's see how close we are to Treasure Beach. So we're only 20 miles away. And so given that the outer eye wall is, it's 5 miles, so we're really only about 15 miles away from the eye. So Treasure Beach in this area right here should be experiencing the eye wall right now. So we really, everyone, you really need to be praying for the people in Jamaica. There's just no way to avoid this. And when you look at where this is coming in, and so I'm going to actually put it. Let's look at the satellite view again. And this is a good. It's not going to let me zoom in anymore. So when you look at the angle that this is coming in, we're starting to get some wobbles as it interacts with the coast, which is normal. As the higher level winds start to interact with these mountains, you're starting to produce friction. Now, I can't even imagine the wind speeds that are occurring in these mountains. We live at 4,000 feet here at the house, where it is not tropical at all right now. Instead, it is 41 degrees and misty. So we experience significantly higher winds at our altitude than they do down in the valleys, and that's just common sense. So you can imagine what the elevation and terrain is going to do to enhance some of these winds. And you also, it's common sense to know that, your terrain enhances the gustiness of your winds. And the Hurricane Center has been rightly saying that some of the wind speeds in these higher elevations could be enhanced by up to 30%. Now, think about what that means. Now, they didn't come out and I don't think they wanted to come out and say what that means. But when you're talking about a 30% enhancement of winds that are 180 miles an hour, that's not good. That's not good at all. Even a 10% enhancement of the wind speeds would mean that you're going to be getting gusts to probably 240 miles per hour. A 30% enhancement, I should say a 30% enhancement would be gusts to about 240 miles an hour. That was already in my head there. So that's crazy. So that's, I can't even imagine. So as we see this is moving to the northeast, what I want to do is show you what that would look like coming into the Treasure Beach. So I have this orientated to the northeast, looking towards Treasure Beach. And I want you to notice that you have this little escarpment of land here. And I'm not I know a little bit of Jamaican topography and geography, but I don't know a lot. But what you notice here is you have this sharp rise in elevation here. Okay. And you go from 50 to 100 feet as you move up here, and then you climb up to about 2,000 feet. And in some cases, 2,200, 2,400. And you have a lot of houses up here. And you've got a lot of houses here along Treasure Beach. There are in this county here alone. Let me back out and show you guys. So this is St. Elizabeth County, I believe. And St. Elizabeth County has about 150,000 people in it. The county next to it has about 200,000 or 190,000 people in it. Now, it doesn't look like it would, but Mandeville, the town of Mandeville, has 50,000 people in it. And if you look at how it's laid out, it's laid out along a lot of little hills. And this zoom out means that we just got more data. So anytime it zooms out, it means that the plane just updated. So just taking an overall look at everything, you can kind of see how the streams are laid out. You can kind of see the little rivers. You can kind of see how everything flows to the coast, how over time heavy rain events have just carved out the land. And this is the way everything's going to flow down, right? As this storm heads up this way, you're going to have massive amounts of rainfall. And as we go back and look at the forecast for that, you can see 20 to 30 inches of rainfall over Jamaica, over this exact area, right? So let's go back and look at this. You've got 20 to 30 inches of rainfall over this entire area being enhanced. And this is just an absolute tragedy unfolding as we speak. And then you're going to have massive storm surge along this area. All along this beach, you have kind of these concave bays. You're still going to get, even though we're 60 miles away from Kingston and maybe 40 miles away from Old Harbor, and you're still going to have you've got the shape of these bays and the constant flow around. Now, I have to say that the original track where we were going to be getting a direct strike on Kingston, that was an absolute nightmare worst case scenario, because you were going to be getting 40 inches of rain over the 7,000 foot peaks of the Blue Mountain Range. And then you were probably going to totally wipe out this airport. Now, this airport's still going to sustain a lot of damage, and you're going to have surge issues because just the shape of the bay. And speaking of the shapes of the bay, as we get on up here into as the system crosses and moves up here into southern Cuba later this afternoon and evening, you've got Gitmo, you've got Guantanamo Bay. Okay, and they're looking at a record surge from this storm. So here's Guantanamo. All right, here's Guantanamo. For those of you, I mean, we've talked about this, right? But probably many of us, many people probably never even actually taken time to even look at where it is. Hear about it, you talk about it on the news, but this is where it is, right here. Okay, this is Gitmo. All right, there it is. And you have pretty good elevation rises up in here. You've got some houses here, but it's still pretty good elevation rises. Okay, you've got 48 feet here, and then it sharply drops off. So all of this is pretty well protected, but you are going to get a surge up in here. The runway is actually still pretty high. It looks like it's about 60 feet. But you are going to get a pretty good surge through here. But fortunately, most of this area is pretty high off the ground, or at least it says it is. Now, I don't know exactly how accurate this is, as far as the Google Earth, um, because it's saying sea level here is 45 feet. So I don't know. I'd have to look that up, to be honest. If somebody knows out there, then put it in the comments. But I don't know exactly what the sea level here is. Um, so I could be wrong. So, but the problem is going to be is look at the shape of this bay, how it's oriented towards the northeast. The storm is going to be moving towards the northeast. You're going to have the flow from the southwest, and you're just going to have this surge coming in, and it's going to be finally moving at a pretty, at a decent rate, and you're just going to have this influx of water coming into Guantanamo. And so, especially on the northern end of Guantanamo Bay, you're really, gonna have a lot of issues here. Luckily, there doesn't look like there's a whole lot there. So let's see. This is the NOAA plane. Let's see if we have any updates with the Air Force plane. I know they're probably going to try to make at least one more center pass. Looks like they're taking a wide berth. It's kind of an unusual pattern for them. So that's that. Let's go back and let's see. Right now, it looks like Montego Bay is not reporting. And Kingston's reporting, looks like, let's see. They got gusts to 29, they got 29 knots, and it looks like they are gusting to, well, they were gusting to in the 50s, but they're not now. So, and their winds are still out of the east-southeast, so they're not having a problem with surge right now. They will later as these winds shift to the south and southwest. So, again, let's go back here. You can just see we're getting ever closer to landfall. Let me, one of the things I like to do is take a look at the discussions. Let's see if there's anything. Yeah. So it looks like the Hurricane Center has made another update. Yeah, 892 millibars now and 185 mile per hour winds. So that is tied now for number 3 all time with the Labor Day hurricane of 1935. So this looks like it will tie the record for the worst landfalling hurricane in history of the Atlantic Basin, because the Labor Day storm has always been the GOAT when it comes to landfalling hurricanes, and that was 1935. And if you've never read the history of the Labor Day hurricane in 1935, it is a fascinating history. It's a fascinating history for many reasons. It's a fascinating history because it's a story of America. It's a story of immigrants. It's a story of hardworking people, of men and women like my grandparents who were trying to work their way through the Great Depression and who lost their lives working on a project to build a railroad and to build a highway into the Florida Keys, and were taking a day off on Labor Day, and were killed by this devastating storm that up until now was the strongest landfalling storm on record. And today is the day that we see that tied or broken. And so this is just unbelievable. So So here is the actual update advisory at 10 a.m. So just a few minutes ago. Extremely dangerous, life-threatening situation. Take cover now. Failure to adequately shelter may result in serious injury and loss of life. Residents in Jamaica that experience the eye should not leave their shelter, as winds will rapidly increase within the backside of the eye wall of Melissa. To protect yourself from wind, the best thing you can do is put many walls between you and the outside interior room without windows, and ideally where you can avoid falling trees is the safest place. NOAA Hunter aircraft find that Melissa continues to strengthen with maximum sustained winds of 185 miles an hour. Minimal center pressure has fallen to 892 millibars based on NOAA and Hurricane Hunter aircraft data. So the next complete package will be out here in about 30 minutes, and I'll stay on the air until that final update package comes out. And after that, I may come on the air and do a recap later this evening as we get the storm headed towards Cuba. But this is just, as you can see, this is just a buzzsaw. It's just an absolute buzzsaw. I've never seen anything like this. Not for this long of a time. And it's absolutely heartbreaking. And those of you who know me, who've known me for any length of time, know how excited I get about weather events. And this is not an event that I want to get excited about, because I know the devastation. And so I would ask all of you to pray for the people of Jamaica, whether they are God's people or they're not God's people, as far as being followers of Jesus Christ, because God does not delight in any of this. But this is the way our world works. We live in a fallen world where things like this happen, and they have happened since the beginning of time. And believe it or not, this actually serves a purpose in transporting heat to the poles. That's what tropical cyclones do. And if it was not for tropical cyclones, the fish in the oceans would die because the water would get too warm. The whole ecosystem of the earth would change. The Arctic and the northern latitudes would be too cold, and the tropics would be too warm. And these tropical systems, they transport enormous amounts of heat energy that we can't even fathom. You have no idea how many atomic bombs worth of energy are going off in this thing every minute. That's how much energy is being released by this latent heat of condensation. And if I had the wherewithal, I could figure it out for you, but I don't have the wherewithal. Maybe I'll figure it out this afternoon, and then when I come back this evening, I will have geeked out enough after sufficient caffeine to give you that information. It would definitely be a fascinating. Of course, now you know I've got to do it because I'm me, and that's what I do. So anyway, let's take a break from Melissa for a second, and let's take a look at what's coming up in the long range. Because as we look at the European, we can see Melissa, and this is again in the upper levels. So let's change this. Let me go back. And let's look at the 500 millibars. Now, when we talk about weather patterns, and you see meteorologists on television talking about the weather patterns on television, many times they're looking at this chart. It's called the 500 millibar chart, and this represents the mid-level of the atmosphere. Now, We say mid-levels, even though it's only 18,000 feet up. And the atmosphere goes up 100 kilometers. It goes up 60 some odd miles until you reach space. And you can say, well, how is 18,000 foot the mid-level of space? Well, it's because half of all the atmosphere resides roughly below 18,000 feet, and half of all the atmosphere resides from 18,000 foot all the way to the limit of space. And that's just the way the density of the air works out. So we look at this level to kind of represent the whole atmosphere as its function, as you know. Now, granted, a lot of things occur below that, and a lot of stuff occurs above that that affect the atmosphere, but this kind of is a good first look. And so when we look at what's going on, we see there's Melissa, and then here comes our big trough of low pressure. We have this system exiting over us here in eastern Tennessee. And for you people in Texas who have been suffering greatly, bless your hearts. You people who have had 90-degree days in the latter part of October, that's why we moved. And your redemption is coming, brothers and sisters. Your your salvation from heat is on the rise, right around the corner, and it's coming in the form of this big trough of low pressure. You see that? You see that coming down through uh, Arkansas there, and then coming into Mississippi. And it's in Mississippi now, boy. A few of you know what that means. That's a story for another time. And you're coming now through Tennessee, right around Halloween for all you trick-or-treaters out there. Uh-oh. Looks like, and look at this. We still have Melissa. It's going to get really close to Bermuda. Matter of fact, let's take a look at that. So this is called the half-say model. And this is, I believe, this is going to be the latest run here. So this is a hurricane model. It's one of the higher end intensity models. And you can see, look at what it does. Look what the 6Z run did. And this is the run for about it came out about 2 o'clock in the morning, perhaps 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. You can see it strengthened it all the way up until landfall. 191 mile an hour winds at landfall. Okay. And then if we go over to the, let's see, I believe I can do that. And we go over to the half B, that's an insane speed right there. So it's predicting 212 miles an hour. Now, I know for a fact I've never seen that. Never in my life have I seen a tropical model put down 200. Matter of fact, I got to make a screen capture. Y'all bear with me because this is, let's just say this. I pray to God I never see this again. Because if I do see this again, then I know where we are. And I do know where we are prophetically. And so it will not surprise me to see this again. Because this is probably 40 miles an hour, 30 miles an hour faster than I've ever seen any tropical model put out an output. Now, I'm not saying that it has not happened. So somebody don't get in the comments and go, well, it said tropical. You know, I'm just saying me. Okay? Me, Nelson. I've never seen it. It might have done it with Milton, but guess what? I was without power for 2 weeks. So I wasn't online. I was cutting trees and delivering food. So, you know, we don't all live in the same world. So 212 miles an hour. And let's go back to the halves. And let's see what it's doing here. You can see it brings it in west of Gitmo. It looks like they're going to get about winds to about 80 miles an hour. And then as we head on up, look at this. Okay, check this out. Look how absolutely monstrous the center of this storm gets. It goes from being just this little pinhole eye, 10 miles across, to just this absolute monster. Almost this annular hurricane, what we call an annular hurricane, that is just an absolute monster, and it just creams Bermuda as a Cat 3. After going over Cuba as a Cat 4, almost a Cat 5, and then hitting the Bahamas, it weakens down after Cuba to borderline Cat 2, Cat 3, and then moves with this just monster eye, this massive wind field. Look at the difference in the wind field, okay? Check it out. You got these reds and these whites. They're about the size of Jamaica, which means it's about 150 miles in diameter. And then look at the expansion. Look at the expansion. And then as we go out, matter of fact, I need to go to the parent. I'll show you the difference here. So just look at what happens to it. And I believe, yeah, I can take that. So let me show you what I was talking about with the waves. Go to Oceanic, Caribbean. There we go. Okay. So this is a wave model from the European, and you can see that it's forecasting 50. Well, actually, you can't see. There we go. Now you can. Well, I was going to cut it off, but guess what? We have the technology. There you go. Okay, your wave heights are going to be right down here. And I've got to be able to scroll, and you're still not going to be able to see because now I've messed up your scrolling. I'll get there, I promise. There we go. Okay. So as we go through this, you're going to see your wave heights. So as it gets south of Cuba, you're looking at waves close to 60 feet. Actually, you are looking at 60-foot waves, 65, bashing the southern shore of Cuba. But then look what happens as it gets out over the central Atlantic, as it gets into the deeper water here. Okay, 67, 68, 72. You get these monster waves. Okay, you're talking 70-foot waves. And this is just massive. Just absolutely massive. And then as we, get over the northern Atlantic, right here, you can just see how the storm we have some massive waves up here. We have 50-foot waves, and this is what I was talking about earlier. You have a lot of ships that move across this area, coming from Rotterdam, that go to New York, that go to the East Coast ports. And so you're looking at massive waves for a very large area that are 35 to 50 feet across the northern part of the Atlantic here by next week. So as we go back to our heights, and we're coming in on the advisory time here, you can see this real big low starts to form. Now, one of the things that I've noticed is we're getting a lot of very early East Coast storms. This will be our third really big East Coast system for October. And that is very unusual. That does not bode well. If you're on the East Coast, that does not bode well for your winter. So you can see that as it moves out over Maine, we get a secondary trough of low pressure moving in here. And it digs down into Texas and then digs down into the Gulf of Mexico. Now this is different. If we go back to yesterday, you can see it did not have this. So let's see. This will be interesting. This is the first time I'm seeing this. Okay, it kind of peters out, but then we get another big trough coming through, and then we kind of go into what we call zonal flow. Zonal flow is when everything moves from the west to the east. We like zonal flow if you like tranquil, average, normal temperature weather. You want zonal flow. My friend from forecaster school who was from Puerto Rico, he would call it high zonal. It's high zonally. That's how he used to say it. Israel Cruz Colon. I miss him. And he passed away many years back. And I really miss him. And he could not pronounce his Z's. So he called it Hasonal. And he says, and so this is Hasonal flow. But you can see before that we have several very strong systems. So what does this look like for my peeps back home? What does this look like for you guys? So this is League City, where my brother from another mother lives, and you got your last hot day today, 87, but tomorrow they're going for a high of 67. Welcome to fall, Southeast Texas. You finally got here. Now we've been in fall since August, but better late than never, right? So high of 67 for Wednesday. A low of 51, a high of 69 for Thursday, and then 72 with a low of 51. That's perfect. Now that I have to say, sometimes that's a July day for us, but to each his own. Y'all can live where y'all want to, and I'll live where I want to. But then again, I'm wearing this inside the house right now. And my heat bill is probably going to be $400 in January, and I'm probably going to be biting my lip and saying choice words. And when I shovel the snow out of my driveway and my sidewalk, because we're probably going to get 60 to 70 inches this year, and so your turn to laugh at me will be in about 2 months. So we all get to take some mild bantering at each other, right? So you look at you're looking at highs in the 70s, and it looks like by Monday you'll be back up into the low 80s. But looking at this long range, I don't see anything. If y'all hear the ruckus, we have a construction crew at the house. They're kind of tearing some stuff up right now. One of them's name's Axel, and one of them's named Athena. And they are Belgian Malinois, and they have a tendency to do what they want to sometimes. And if you hear fighting, that's how Belgian Malinois say, "I love you." They eat each other apart and grab at each other and growl, and sometimes they leave marks on your hand, and they're not for the faint of heart. So anyway, let's take a look at what this weather, and we're getting really close to the advisory time. And let's take a look at, what does this look like weather-wise? Because I haven't seen this, so this will be interesting. So as we go through time and we look at, I'm reminded, and I'm sure some of my meteorology friends from past years will watch this, and they'll remember, we used to get these charts on what's called an AFDIGS machine, and it was on this special paper that came sealed in a bag because it was wet with a special chemical. And you would cut the bag open with your scissors, and it had a certain smell to it because it was chemically. But I always kind of liked the smell. I was one of those kids that ate the Elmer's glue, so I was that kid. So I kind of liked the smell of it. But it actually burned the images with electricity, by having a chemical reaction on that paper. And we would get these exact same charts with these lines on it, but not the precip. Over shortwave radio. We would take these little machines. I think it was called the, well, I know Jeff will remember, maybe the TR 9500 or something like that, and we would throw the antennas, the which were basically just copper wires. We throw them up into a tree with lead weights, and that was always fun. Taking your 3 ounce lead weight with a string and swinging it up over your head and trying to lasso a limb and then pull it down and pull your antenna wires up, kind of like a ham operator sometimes. And then you would try to get it, whether you're Central America or wherever you are, try to get the signal out of Navy Norfolk. And I used to remember the frequency. It was like 7,800 kilohertz or something like that. And we would get these charts, these the same exact ones, but now they're all electronic. So what this is you have your barometric pressure, your sea level pressure here, and you can see there's Melissa. And then you have what you call your thickness lines. And this kind of just shows you how dense the atmosphere here is. Up here, the atmosphere is very thin because it's very cold. Down here, the atmosphere is a lot thicker because it's warm. And so what you see here is you have this storm here moving up the East Coast. And then you can kind of see what's happening here. You have Melissa moving out right ahead of the storm. And then you have the second system popping in. You can see this little bubble here, this little circle. This is a very cold spot of air. It looks like the thickness here is 546. Now, in meteorology, we use the 546 line as a common denominator for the snow line. Whenever we were in Texas, forecasting, when we saw that 546 line as meteorologists come over us, we were excited because that meant that we could get snow. The 540 line was even better because there's your 540 line and you can see it's blue. So anytime you get near that 546, 540 line, that was like, hey, we might get some snow. Now, up in the mountains, it works a lot differently because your atmosphere, you're cheating. Your atmosphere begins a lot higher up. And the higher up you are, the more cheating you get to do with higher numbers. So as you can see, look what happens. You get a low form. Now, I don't necessarily buy that this thing's just going to spin out. We'll see how this develops. But then we have our next system come through. And then we see another system coming through here. All right, let's get back to our storm and let's see where we are. Yeah, we're right on the coast now. So I would say that, and we need to also remember that we have what's called foreshortening in satellite. However, with this satellite, I think with GOES 19, I believe it's probably sitting almost right on top of it. I can't remember exactly where GOES 19 is, what longitude it is, but you have what's called foreshortening that you have to take into account in satellite. And so if the satellite is literally sitting right, because remember, these things are sitting up, I believe, at 23,000 miles above the Earth, unless you're a flat earther, and then they don't exist. And these just magically appear somehow. So they sit 23,000 miles above the Earth in geosynchronous orbit. And if the cloud is right below them, they're looking right down on it. However, if the cloud is way over here and you're looking at the cloud, let's see if I can do this in view. If you're looking from this angle and you're looking at the cloud and then you're looking at the land, you may think the cloud is actually over here. Let me see that. You may think the cloud is over here when in fact the cloud is over here because your angles, if that makes sense. And so in some cases of foreshortening, your cloud could actually be upwards of 40, 50, 60 miles closer to you, or look closer to you, or further away, depending on the situation, if that makes sense. It's because of the angle. If your clouds are higher than the Earth, and the angle that it's looking at each different thing, it's just physics. So, but I believe that this satellite is looking straight down. And so you can see if we pause this, you can see that we are really, really close. Yeah, it's not going to let me zoom. I wish I could zoom in closer, but yeah, we're right there. So let's take a look at what we have. I'm wondering if this Air Force plane is having to depart for some reason. It looks like maybe they have issues. Let me come back here. You can see it looks like the Air Force plane is going home. Or going back to, I guess they were in, is this Bar? All right, looked like I dropped off for a second and now I'm back. So I guess our planes are leaving. And if I do drop off, it's because we do have some pretty thick clouds over us. And I do have Starlink. And so if I go down to like only one satellite that's linked up and it's on the horizon and it's looking through a lot of thick atmosphere with all these thick clouds over us and drizzle and stuff, then you know, we're kind of hosed. But it looks like both of the recon are headed home, unfortunately. And let me try to confirm that by looking at the recon page to see what they say. Oh wait, no, there's another plane. Okay, there's another plane coming in. It's just hitting load on my graphics. Or maybe it's not. Maybe that's just old. Well, hold on. Let's see. I rely a lot on these guys to kind of tell me what's going on with recon because I don't have the time to look it up. So here's a really good view of exactly what we're looking at here. Let me close this off. There we go. Yeah, look at this, guys. Yeah, so this one, we're real close here. Oh, wow. Look at this. $219 knots in this eye wall drop zone. Wow. That's 252 miles per hour. So that beats the record from yesterday. That's 252 miles an hour. That's almost an EF5 tornado. I really hope I never see this again in my lifetime. I really, really hope I never see this again. Let's see if the advisory's out. So Josh Morganman is reporting crashing sounds like an explosion, wreckage flying down the street, trees bending way over, very unpleasant pressure in the ears. And he is in St. Elizabeth Parish in Jamaica. So if we go back to where that is, that's St. Elizabeth County. This is St. Elizabeth County right here. Okay. This area right here. So he's right along probably somewhere near Treasure Beach. Okay, so here is, wow. So this is what's called the TDR, composite wind speed, from the Recon. And you can just see, the other thing that we don't ever see is a wind field that's so perfectly symmetrical. Look at this wind field. You normally will see the wind speed in the Northeast Quad that's like this, but this is unbelievable. So let's do this. Let's Okay, so this is from Treasure Beach. Obviously, they're having connection issues. Go figure. Let me pause it and see if it can buffer some. Yes, indeed. Pray for Jamaica, folks. You go back a page. And that's why I like this site, because there's a lot of links that people dig up and find. And so Josh Morganman posted here, punishing Gus in Crawford. So he's in Crawford. So let's see exactly where that is in Jamaica. Let me see. Okay, so he's up here. And so if we look at where that is, he's right up here west of Black River, which is right up here. He's going to catch the western edge of the eye, possibly. So he's in the northwest eye wall right now. Door thundering against the frame, unpleasant pressure in the ears, trees outside waving wildly like they're insane. And there's a really good view of the storm. Oh, okay. Here's what happened. So the aircraft exceeded the G limit, which is 2.5 Gs. So they hit such severe turbulence that they exceeded the G limit. And so they're worried about airframe damage. I can't imagine what that would have been like in a prop plane. Now, I've been in an F-16 numerous times. I've experienced 9Gs, but you're supposed to feel 9Gs in a fighter jet. You are not supposed to feel 2.5 Gs in a weather plane. That is unbelievable. That is unbelievable. All right, I think we're getting close to the advisory time. Yeah, so here's Josh Morgan's position is right around here. So those tweets that I was reading you, uh, it's right here. So he looks like he is actually going to get the eye. All right, let's see if we have an update here. Yes, we do have the update. Okay, they haven't changed that 892 because we haven't had a plane in there. It looks like because actually it looks like that one plane they were showing was old data. I can go look that up real quick and then we will look it up and then we will wrap it up. Yeah, I don't see anything. Okay, public advisory. 17.9 north, 77.9 west. Winds are 185. Now, one of the things I will say is let's see what they call the gusts. So they're going with gusts to 190 miles. I'm sorry, 190 knots. That's gust to 220. So we've got wind speeds of 185 miles an hour with gusts to 220. However, in the drop zone, we saw that there were gusts to 250. And what that means is as we get into these higher elevations of Jamaica, you could have gusts to 220 to 250 miles per hour. And that's going to lead to a lot of deforestation, absolute leveling of complete forests, absolute devastation of the ecosystem there. I can't even imagine what's going to happen here. So if we look at the discussion here, moving towards the north-northeast near 9, so we have a solid forward motion now, turning northeast. And so making landfall here in the next couple of hours. It's actually probably making landfall right now. Wind speeds 185. Let's see. Estimated central pressure is 892. Catastrophic hurricane force winds are spreading over Jamaica within the eye wall. Higher elevation areas where wind speeds atop and windward sides of hills and mountains could see 30% stronger. So there's your 250 miles an hour wind, miles per hour wind. So rainfall 15 to 30 inches, 6 to 8 inches, localized 12 inches for southern Hispaniola. Eastern Cuba 10 to 20 inches, local amounts of 25. And we need to remember these are additional amounts. We've already had a lot of rain, and it had been raining there for a while anyway. Storm surge 9 to 13 feet, 8 to 12 feet there over Cuba, 5 to 8 foot over the southeastern Bahamas tomorrow. So if we go and now look at the discussion, looks like everybody and their mama is trying to get on the Hurricane Center site right now. So Melissa has strengthened since the last advisory. 15 nautical mile wide eye. So the eye's actually expanded a little bit. That's very unusual. 892 millibars, flight level winds of 172 knots. So they have 160 knot, so that's 185 miles an hour. Don't really get into too much discussion. There's really not a lot. I'm really surprised they don't discuss it more than that. So if we look at the current track, here is the current track. You can see after lingering down here for so long, in the same amount of time, we're sitting way up here in the northern Atlantic, right? And so we go down here. The one thing I think I probably would disagree with a little bit is I think we're probably going to intensify up a little bit more here. I believe we make another run at a Cat-3 in 60 hours. Instead of it just being 100 miles an hour, I think as that trough starts to impact it a little bit more, we get some baroclinic enhancement, baroclinic forcing as that engine suck starts even more. And I think the models are showing that. So, but we'll see. It's kind of neither here nor there right now, except for the folks on Bermuda. So as we look at the track and we zoom in here, you can see what we're looking at for the Bahamas and Cuba. And then as we get out, you can see there's Bermuda. And we are making a very close approach within the margin of error to Cuba. Now, I want to take just a second. Most of you probably know this, but I want to take a second to talk about this forecast cone so you guys can remember this for next season. That remember, this forecast cone is an error only. This is not where they expect it to go. They expect it to go within the cone. That is a misnomer. That is a myth. This is an error cone. It is, you draw a circle around where the position is, and 2/3 of all future storms will fall within this circle based on the errors of their tracks in the past. 1/3 of them will fall outside of the circle. And that's all it is. And then you take all the circles and you draw a line on one side and you draw a line on the other and you connect the dots, and that's how you make your cone. That's all the science behind it. They're not saying, so you'll never see one cone smaller and one cone bigger based on its uncertainty. Oh, we don't know where it's going to go, so we're going to make a cone this big and make a cone this big. Or we know exactly where it's going to go, so our cone's going to be as thick as this line. It doesn't work that way. It's always this width. If every single storm that would be in this position and moving in that direction at that speed is going to be that exact same cone, is what I'm trying to say, because it's based on error rates. It's not based on forecasting. At least the cone isn't. Okay? So, as we look at the rainfall, as we start to wrap this up, and I believe this is, I don't know if they've updated this yet. No, they haven't updated this. So, as we start to wrap this up, we leave this with an intensifying up until landfall, Category 5, historic, one of the strongest, if not the strongest on record tropical cyclones ever to strike in the world. Top 5, maybe top 3. So, and this is just absolutely catastrophic. I'll take one more look at the, yeah, and I agree with this. This is a prolonged F5 tornado effect. This is like getting hit with an F5 tornado for hours. So we need to really pray for the people of Jamaica, and I believe that that is how I will end this live stream. I'll end it with a prayer for the people of Jamaica, people of Cuba, the Bahamas, and Bermuda. And so I thank you for joining me. I hate that we've had to have a live stream for such a tragic event that I know is unfolding right now. You know, as we go back real quick and see if and you can actually see you can see how that's Treasure Beach. So And this is, if any of you want to watch this live, it's from JS Photography. Juliet Sierra Photography, JS Photography. They're streaming right now from Treasure Beach. I don't know whose feed this is, but by all means, get out there and support them. So, with that being said, Father, we thank you for your mercy, which is renewed every morning. And it's abundant even in times of tragedy, it's abundant even in times of turmoil. And Father, we know that your people can come and trust in you. And so, Father, right now we lift up the people of Jamaica. We lift up the people of Cuba, the Bahamas, and Bermuda. And we ask, Lord, that you would watch over them and protect them. And Father, that above all things, that your will be done and that you will be glorified in this. I pray, Father, for the hearts of the people of the United States, the hearts of people in Europe, the hearts of people in countries with means. That, Father, you would move on them to help support these people who are poor, who many of them, Father, are your people. There are many people of great faith in the country of Jamaica. They are your children. They call on you as God. They acknowledge your Son, Jesus Christ, as their Savior, and they love you. And so, Father, we just call on you to be with them today, to hold their hand, to give them a peace that surpasses all understanding, and to guard their hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. Father, I pray that you would move on our government and move on our people here in this country to reach out and support them with our overflowing abundance of blessing. We thank you and we praise you. In Jesus' name, amen. I thank you for taking the time to join me, or if you watch this later, I thank you for taking the time to watch it. So until next time, may God richly bless you, my beloved.